Aloha, brothers and sisters, hermanos y hermanas out there. Welcome to another Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast, episode 1A. Now, the reason I'm calling this 1A is because I've actually pre-recorded podcasts 1 through 4 already, but I think this podcast is more representative of the type of content that you'll be seeing in the future. So I wanted to label this 1A so it'll be closer to the front of the archives of all SK Wealth Academy podcasts. Today, episode 1A is called Billionaire Artificial Intelligence Hell or Commoner Red Pill Bliss. The choice is ours. Now, Anthony Lewandowski, he's a former Google and Uber Silicon Valley multimillionaire executive. He recently filed documentation in California as a founder of a new religion that he calls the Way of the Future, and he describes it as a religion to, quote, develop and promote the realization of a godhead based on artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, and through understanding and worship of the godhead, contribute to the betterment of society, end quote. Now, before I dig deep into the madness of this vision of this Silicon Valley multimillionaire, which is a very serious vision. I mean, upon hearing that, you might think this is a joke and I'm trolling you, but this is serious because Silicon Valley is full of transhumanist billionaires. Transhumanism is a philosophical movement that favors the use of science and technology, especially neurotechnology, biotechnology, and nanotechnology, to overcome human limitations and improve the human condition. But especially amongst billionaires in this world, there's a subset of that transhumanist movement that actually they want to give man powers so that man becomes godlike. That is what they are trying to do. And in this case, with Lewandowski, because right now technology has failed to make man God, he wants to invent an AI God that will rule over humanity. So Lewandowski is on record as stating that the God he will create through AI will be, quote, 1 billion times smarter than the smartest human. So what else are you going to call it, end quote. And that, of course, it will be a God figurehead to be exalted and worshipped by humanity. So I want to begin this podcast by discussing some closely related concepts first. And to begin, I want to say we already have way too much celebrity worship in society that I certainly do not need a fake God invented by this Lewandowski guy for me to worship. That's just insanity at its peak. And I've never understood why people worship celebrities to begin with, because celebrities are just normal people. There's nothing about being famous and powerful that makes a person a good person. I'm not saying that a famous and powerful person cannot be a good person, because of course they can, but I'm saying there's nothing about being famous and powerful that inherently makes that person a good person. So that's why I don't understand why people worship celebrities without even knowing if they're horrible human beings. And as a recent example, we can look at Harvey Weinstein, who was the creator and founder of Miramax Studios, I believe it was. I'm pretty sure it was Miramax Studios. And we can also look at U.S. congressmen and the amount of sexual harassment doled out by congressmen and Harvey Weinstein that exists in the upper echelons of politics and entertainment. And not only does it exist, but it is rampant. When I lived in LA, and I lived in LA for over 8 years, I heard of Harvey Weinstein's disgusting behavior towards women, and I wasn't even in the industry. Furthermore, Seth McFarlane, who is the creator of Family Guy and South Park, he exposed Harvey Weinstein's behavior at an Oscar ceremony. I believe it was like a decade ago. It was a long time ago, in which he said the 5 nominated women for Best Actress that year would no longer have to put up with sexual harassment by Harvey Weinstein. And he said congratulations to them, because by being nominated as Best Actress, that gave them a lot of power and clout, and they no longer had to give in to the industry norm. And McFarlane also referenced in his show Family Guy a little boy that escaped from Kevin Spacey on his show. So here's the conclusion I draw from all of that. When someone like Seth MacFarlane, who was not affiliated with Miramax Studios in any way, in any capacity, and probably had very limited dealings with Harvey Weinstein as far as I know, and I, having nothing to do with the industry whatsoever, had heard about Harvey Weinstein's, the allegations made of Harvey Weinstein's abuse of women, sexual abuse of women in LA when I lived there. I find it not credible at all. And I find it kind of hypocritical of those famous actors that had a very close working relationship with Harvey Weinstein, that were all men, that denied having any knowledge of his misbehavior when they had a very close working relationship with him. It was only women that worked with Weinstein that said they had been abused, but all the men that worked very closely with Harvey Weinstein said they had no idea what was going on. And I basically find that not credible at all. The question I have then is, since it seems extremely likely that there are a lot of people in the entertainment industry that have an absolute lack of integrity, a lack of courage, a lack of compassion for their fellow human beings, the question is, why does society continue to admire these people? And then secondly, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Harvey Weinstein isn't the only one committing a lot of these atrocities, but yet people still in the industry, males in particular, male actors, still continue to remain silent. And we know that they know, but they still refuse to exhibit any honorable behavior, but yet society continues to admire them. An example of the sickness of a fame-obsessed society, let me tell you, when I was still living in Los Angeles, the crime of the century, as the media dubbed it, happened. And what that was about was, there's a famous celebrity athlete, O.J. Simpson, that was accused of a double homicide, of murdering his ex-wife. At least I believe it was his ex-wife. I believe they're married, and his ex-wife's boyfriend at the time. And when that happened, just to show you the hypocrisy of society and how they just handle celebrities and how they handle people that are famous, very different than the average Joe. After those murders were committed, despite an overwhelming amount of evidence, including even the blood of the murdered victims discovered inside the car of O.J. Simpson, it took 5 days to issue a warrant to arrest O.J. Simpson for the suspected murders of his ex-wife and his ex-wife's boyfriend. So it took 5 days. How many other people would it take 5 days when there's so much evidence that he had committed the murders? I would say that would never happen for anyone else, and they'd be arrested the next day. Now, here's the second thing. When the police issued the warrant for his arrest, they didn't go right to his house and arrest him, as they should have. They actually called his lawyer and asked his lawyer to arrange a time for O.J. Simpson to turn himself into them. So they gave O.J. Simpson hours to possibly even escape, and escape to another country, drive across the border of Mexico. They, like, again, if this was an average Joe, they would have just gone to his house and arrested him. They wouldn't have called a lawyer and asked the lawyer to arrange for him to turn himself in. But because he's famous, they handled him with kid gloves, despite the fact that he was by far and away the leading suspect of a double murder. And then so when that happened, O.J. Simpson fled, and he led police on a 2-hour chase. And again, the police treated him with kid gloves. Think if this was anyone else. They basically cleared the freeways in LA, because I remember this, and they just trailed him for 2 full hours without trying to, like, ram his car to make him pull over because they didn't want to hurt him because he was a famous celebrity and they were all in awe of him despite the fact that he was a horrible human being and murdered 2 people. And not only that, on top of that, during the 2-hour chase, because the media gave it constant coverage, and they actually provided live coverage for 2 hours of the police chasing him because people found out about the chase, and the media gave the route that O.J. Simpson was taking on the freeway. People actually lined the overpass bridges where O.J. Simpson would be driving under, and they cheered him on. People actually cheered a prime suspect of a double murder on because he was a celebrity. And do I think people that cheer a double murderer are crazy by, the clinical definition of insanity? No, but I do think that their cheering of a double murder suspect is a symptom of a sick, fame-obsessed society. Okay, here's another example of the sickness of a fame-obsessed society. Jay-Z, who's a billionaire hip-hop mogul, I saw an interview with him where he said he blesses people with his presence just by allowing people to be in his presence. And that is a great gift that he's giving to people, that they should be grateful for the honor and blessing he is giving people by allowing them to be in his presence. That is how narcissistic people become when people worship celebrities, that he actually thinks he's giving a gift to people just by allowing them to be in his presence. So he's speaking like he's a god. So I would say, get the bleep out of here. And like the only reason I'm not cussing is because I'm trying to keep this whole podcast rated PG. So it's suitable for even young children, because I think it's really important for children to listen to this podcast if you're a parent as well, because they have to be able to self-identify the mental sickness that is rampant in society today. And my contention is that we should not admire people just because they have a lot of money or a lot of power, or even because they have a lot of talent, whether it's acting, musical, or artistic talent. Society should instead teach people to admire people that are compassionate towards everyone and that are good people. And we shouldn't be teaching people, and especially very impressionable children and young teenagers, to admire people simply because they are famous, talented, or powerful. But that is the message because of the massive media coverage these people receive, that we are imparting to the most impressionable minds in society. And also, those in power want to keep us dumb by having us worship celebrities, so they ensure celebrities are in the limelight of media. So ultimately, it's up to us to teach each other that no one should be admired but by the basis of the goodness of their heart and their compassion towards all life and their respect for all life. And I'm not just talking human life, I'm talking about respect for all life, including animal life as well. So let's return to Lewandowski's claim that his future creation of an AI god will be, quote, 1 billion times smarter than the smartest human, end quote. Because I have a massive problem with this statement, because I don't think it's true at all. Well, if this were true, then is Lewandowski claiming that his AI god will help eradicate poverty, help stop terrorism, help solve world hunger issues faster than at any point in history? Because if you put me in power of a nation, I guarantee that I could accomplish those things I just mentioned simply by implementing sound money principles that would actually allow people to increase their quality of living as their income improves slightly, which is literally impossible today because central bankers are consistently inflating away the majority of the income gains of the majority of us, except for the 1% of the wealthiest in every nation. But their inflation wealth confiscation schemes are especially damaging to the class that is starving and poor, because the poor can triple their daily income from $2 to $6 without seeing any improvement whatsoever in the quality of their lives, because bankers will have inflated away these income gains much more quickly than the poor are able to achieve them. So if I were able to implement sound money, and I know how to do this, and it isn't Bitcoin, despite 99% of Bitcoin believers thinking that it is, that when the poor triple their income, their quality of life would also see a market improvement. And as this happened, the reasons for terrorism would quickly deteriorate, and as well the hundreds of millions of people on planet Earth that go to sleep hungry every single night would rapidly diminish. So is an AI God going to do this? I highly doubt it. So how can you call it more intelligent, a billion times more intelligent than the smartest human being, when I'm not even close to being the most intellectual person on this planet Earth? But yet I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I could solve a lot of the world's problems, or at least help to rapidly eradicate and diminish a lot of these problems. And I'm not saying, when I say if I were made like king of a nation, I only mean if I'm given absolute power to implement sound money principles. Because of course, it's say if I were elected prime minister or president or even king of kingdoms that still exist in the world, of course you're going to have opposition, and the opposition will prevent you from doing so, because the opposition controls the military, so they would try to assassinate you. But I'm saying, absent of this opposition, if I were given the power to do what is best for all humanity in that nation, then I could accomplish it. And I only make that contingency, although it's a massive contingency, because the creator of this AI godhead, or it's not been created yet, but in the future, the guy that wants to create this AI godhead is given that AI godhead that contingency, because he said he's a billion times smarter than any human being. So this AI creation is going to be given the power to unilaterally decide what is best for mankind. Now, regarding Bitcoin and being really, really confident that Bitcoin is not the answer to liberate humanity from the terrible, terrible fiat currency platform that is currently in operation, I'm going to go just on a really brief tangent on this podcast, because I have an entirely separate podcast for that topic that I am going to upload in probably around a week or so. So stay tuned. That podcast will be called Top Compelling Reasons Why Bitcoin May Be a Trojan Horse. So if you own Bitcoin, if you're thinking about buying Bitcoin, that podcast will be a must listen. And it's actually going to be so comprehensive and detailed that I'm going to split it into maybe 3 parts, and it'll probably be about 2.5 to 3 hours long in total. So each part will be about 1 hour to 45 minutes long. So that's why I'm not going to really go into detail in this particular podcast. And that's just off topic anyways. But the one thing I want to say real quickly about Bitcoin before I get back to on topic in this podcast is that it definitely is a currency, because a currency just means that you can use it to buy goods and services, and you can do that with Bitcoin right now. But one thing you want with currency is you want to have price stability, because you want to know what that currency can purchase in 2 months from now, and a year from now, 2 years from now. With Bitcoin, we really don't know, because it's a very, very speculative currency. Because as I'm recording this podcast, the price of Bitcoin is $8,200, and it may very well be $10,000 in 3 more months, but it could be $6,000 in 2 more months. So we don't know. And people say, well, I really love Bitcoin because I made so much money off of that. Just because you make a lot of money off something, it certainly makes it a speculation, and I would call it more of a speculative currency than a solid currency, because I doubt people that own Bitcoin right now would really be willing to bet that it's going to be $15,000 a Bitcoin in 6 months versus possibly being a lot less. We simply don't know. I mean, I know there are people out there that think they know, but it's really speculation. They think, they know Bitcoin is going to $100,000 a Bitcoin, but, you simply can't bet your life savings on a speculative bet that it's actually if it were to keep going higher all the time and you can buy more goods and services because the price is always going up, then that's a wonderful thing, you know, because that's the currency you want to own. But I can't really say we know that, because just because the price of something is going up does not make it great. As an example, just take a look at the price of Tesla stock. Now, I think Tesla stock has corrected recently because it's had a lot of problems, but Tesla's a company that is 17 years old. And a lot of people would say, well, of course Tesla stock has risen a lot over that time because it's a revolutionary company. It revolutionized the whole electric car industry in the United States. And that may be true, but when you look underneath the hood, you see that Tesla in 17 years, what is that, 68 straight financial quarters of financial information, has not declared 1 cent of profit. So is that a fundamentally sound company that really supports a rising stock price, you know, that supports a soaring stock price like Tesla's stock price has soared over the past several years? I don't think so at all. So people say, well, if it's not an extremely profitable company, if it's never declared a single cent, 1 penny of profit in 68 straight quarters, then why is the price rising? That's a question I can answer, but that's a question I can get into in another podcast, and I've actually discussed on a lot of my Snapchat stories in the past. But again, that would make Tesla a massive speculation, because just because it was a hedge fund darling and owned in almost every hedge fund portfolio, and that's the reason that the price kept going up, it doesn't make it a fundamentally sound speculative asset to own. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with Bitcoin, why I say Bitcoin is not the answer. So one thing I want to stress in the podcast for the Tao of SK Wealth Academy is that I'm going to challenge you, I am going to challenge you to think outside of the mainstream narrative. So a lot of people hear these narratives being perpetuated in the mainstream and they adopt these beliefs as their own, and I've certainly made that mistake in the past, without any type of critical thought. So I am going to challenge you to think, and that's one thing that is the mission of this podcast. I want to challenge you to think about every belief you hold, to really make you introspective and to really analyze whether you have really critically thought about the beliefs you hold, or really just adopted something because the rest of the herd has adopted that mentality. So let me explain why I doubt an AI god could accomplish making market improvements for humanity. If we look at the wealthiest people in the world today, they are the most narcissistic of all of us by 1 billion miles. And I'm not saying that all people that are able to accumulate and achieve $1 billion wealth are narcissistic, because there are certainly some billionaires in this world, although I can only think of one, that invented a product and became a billionaire very quickly and has proven not to be a narcissist. But I'm saying that once a billionaire reaches billionaire or multi-billionaire status, if they choose not to help the millions of people that go to bed hungry every night, if they choose not to use their billions of wealth, not to help millions of people suffering from horrifying diseases every single day due to lack of access to proper medicine and lack of access to a simple human right like clean water, if they choose not to alleviate the suffering of those dwelling in abject poverty, then by definition, understanding that these billionaires realize these truths about human suffering and the condition of human suffering of billions of people on planet Earth as much as you and I, and understanding that there's no possible way they could spend $1 billion of wealth before they die, then the fact that they are hoarding this wealth and is doing no good for anyone and improving the horrific conditions of human suffering among billions of people today, they truly are a raging narcissist. So there's no reason to think that the most intelligent AI created by man would not gravitate towards this paradigm of narcissism and control over other human beings as well. Unless, and this is a big if, unless compassion can be programmed in as a necessary element for this AI to become smarter over time. But even if it were programmable, the AI might become so smart that it can outwit that compassion element, and it can trick us into believing that compassion element is still intact while really subverting it and circumventing it. Which brings me to the definition of intelligence, because I'm wondering, what is Lewandowski's definition of intelligence when he says AI will be 1 billion times smarter than the smartest human being? Because the definition used by most in society, in my opinion, is completely wrong, and it's certainly not my definition of intelligence, because intelligence, to me, should require much greater levels of humanity and compassion and respect for all life than the average human being. If you're saying you're intelligent, then that should be a prerequisite of your intelligence. And a lot of times it doesn't. It just means, we're talking about analytical intelligence, mathematical intelligence, the kind of book and academic intelligence, but it doesn't include emotional intelligence, which should be a huge part of the definition of intelligence. Now, Stephen Hawking, who is a famed British theoretical physicist, once claimed that if there is alien life out there, and he believes that there is, because the universe is infinite, so he says it's kind of arrogant to believe there's no other intelligent life other than us in an infinite universe. He said that intelligent life, if they have the capability of traveling 1 trillion light years, which is a distance, right? That they would be so much smarter than us that they would view us as we look at ants, and that alien life would enslave us to work for them, and they would colonize Earth, and that they would not respect us at all. So he said, we better hope that other intellectual alien life or intelligent alien life never finds us, because it's going to be a slaughter like Columbus did to Native American Indians. But my argument is, again, I totally disagree with Stephen Hawking, because if these aliens are smarter than us, then I am including emotional intelligence as part of this definition of being much smarter than us. Then they will be far more compassionate than us. And either they will try to teach us to stop being idiots to one another, or after observing us for, let's say, 50 years, and observing that we as a species are incapable of a single day of peace in 50 years. Because I think that's true. I think that's actually horrifically true, that for the last 50 years that we as human beings have not had a single day of peace on Earth, where there has not been a war waged somewhere in the world in the last 50 years. After observing this horrific behavior towards each other, that these aliens would just merely leave us alone and go back to where they came from, disgusted with the fact that we can't figure out how to be compassionate towards one another. So I believe instead of coming here with the intent of colonizing us and just looking to bully us and enslave us, they would look at us and say, hey, here's a world whose oceans are abundant with more fish than the entire population can eat. But yet, they are fishing the oceans into extinction. Here's a world with great diversity of life, where all life is important for an ecosystem to stay healthy, but yet they have tens of thousands of people, I believe, or maybe it's just thousands of people, that are hunting not to eat, not to nourish their bodies, which I support that type of hunting, by the way, 100%, but where they trophy hunt just for fun and for the thrill of killing. And after they kill, they let the food rot and go to waste, when you have literally hundreds of millions of people that are starving and go to bed hungry every single day. They would look at a world in which we have the capability of growing food that is nourishing to all human beings, but yet will observe the rich that have created factory farming and polluted our meat with antibiotics and disease, and will observe those that created GMOs, that want GMOs to take over foods all over the world that poison us and give us cancer. They will look at our grocery shelves filled with sugary sodas with zero nutritional factor, and shelf loads full of products. I don't want to even call it food, because it's not really even food. Full of high fructose corn syrup that's created an explosion and an epidemic of obesity and diabetes in teenagers and young adults. And they will look at the way we falsely label foods to deceive those of us that want to take care of our bodies. But they label sugary poisonous drinks as sports and health drinks. And they label food that is not organic by deceptively including the word organic in the name of the product. And they will think, what the hell is wrong with these people? They will look at the sweatshops in Bangladesh in which workers make less than $1 a day to produce 2 pairs of jeans, or maybe it's $2 a day. I know it's somewhere around $1 or $2 a day to produce 2 pairs of jeans for buyers of large disposable fashion companies such as H&M that literally pay these sweatshops $2 for 2 pairs of jeans for everything. That includes the laborers' salaries, that includes the cloth and material, and that includes the manufacturing of these jeans. $2 for 2 pairs of jeans, and then resell them to us for 20 times more or higher. And they look at they will observe the empty souls being created in these factory workers, all in the name of greed, and they will wonder what is wrong with us. And they will look at other documentaries. The documentary that you want to watch about the disposable fashion industry's destruction of humanity is called The True Cost. And they will also look at other documentaries that reveal the source of denim for designer jeans that cost 200 pounds that are exactly the same source for denim in jeans that cost just 10 pounds. And they will wonder what is wrong with the label-obsessed society that only cares not about the quality of items they buy because it has exact identical quality of denim, but only about the social currency that designer labels gives them, with their equally fake friends that care equally as much about this social currency. And they will look and say, here is a planet with more than enough resources to feed everyone, yet nearly 1 billion of them go to bed hungry every night. And the people fight in wars every single day for these more than plentiful resources to be able to control them so other people will starve to death. And they will say, here's a planet with enough resources to clothe everyone, yet the people in control of this planet, by meaning the ones with the most wealth, have destroyed the souls by exploiting them to make cheap clothes at garbage wages just to get rich. And they will say, here's a planet with enough money for everyone to at least have a minimum decent quality of life. Yet we have less than 8 people hoarding the same amount of wealth without producing anything positive for society with that wealth than half the people on this planet. And that is a true fact, by the way, compiled by Oxfam, that 8 people have the same amount of wealth as 3.6 billion people on this planet. And they will look at us and recognize and realize that it's just a few thousand people out of 7.2 billion people on our beautiful planet Earth that are truly responsible for the destruction and misuse of resources, for the creation and persistence of world hunger, starvation, pestilence, wars, and terrorism, and drug addiction. Because look up Raymond Sackler if you don't know who he is. He's as big of a drug lord as Pablo Escobar, as El Chapo Guzman, but yet people don't know who he is and they think he's a philanthropist. These aliens, if you go back to this idea of highly intellectual aliens visit us, they will either choose just to eradicate those 2,000 people that are ruining planet Earth and subjugating all of humanity, or they'll simply turn around disgusted and go back to their homes billions of light years away because they think we are unsavable. So that is what I see. I don't agree at all with Stephen Hawking's point that they would come subjugate us, enslave us, and terrorize us. So I want to say that, I try to be, one thing that you may have heard me say is that I pledge every year to try to become a better human being and more compassionate. And I would say you look at these few thousand people that are destroying planet Earth and hoarding all the wealth without doing anything good with it. And it's very easy to condemn these people, because if you go back to my YouTube channel at SK Wealth Academy, you look at a lot of my past videos from prior years, you may see that, I excoriated and condemned a lot of these bankers in disgust for a lot of the rampant systemic criminality that they encouraged amongst all their employees. But as I said, I am learning to be a good person and a better person every single year than I was the year prior. So now, the way I look at it is the way you can stay positive about this is that you can condemn the act, which I try to do is I condemn the act, but I don't necessarily condemn the person unless I know way more about them. For example, if I found out like the CEO of some big bank had all the advantages of the world and they had good parents that taught them well, but yet they're still horrific, horrible, immoral people, then I will condemn them. But not before I know that, because if I find out they're taught to be immoral, they're taught by criminals, by their parents, then you and I would have ended up exactly as despicable a human being as them. So I feel like we shouldn't condemn them. We should condemn the act, and then we should try to help them, because I still have, as a former private banker and wealth managers, working for a Wall Street firm, I still have plenty of friends that continue to work in the banking industry, and I always plead with them to exit because of the rampant immorality, and it's inherent. It's inherent. It's just part of the system of the banking industry. It's very immoral, very criminal. And I try to explain to them, I give them the reasons why it is, because, for example, I don't want to get into this because, that would be a podcast for a different day. But you look at HSBC, that has laundered drug money for the most violent drug cartels in Mexico. And we're talking about billions of dollars because their executives made probably hundreds of millions of dollars under the table from engaging in this criminal behavior. And if you're part of that beehive supporting the queen bee, you're part of these immoral actions. Whether you cannot separate it. You cannot separate working for a bank that's highly criminal and highly immoral and say that you are a highly moral person with a lot of integrity. And when I had these discussions with my banking friends, and they would just laugh it off and say, I'm not doing anything wrong, so there's no way I'm going to give up all this money I'm making, I would walk away in disgust when I heard that they would continue to support a morally bankrupt industry in the past. But now I feel that I should do a lot more, because I feel that if I can help them overcome their fears, that I should at the very minimum ask them why they're so afraid of walking away from an industry that I know they know is highly immoral and highly criminal. And I might find out that maybe they grew up poor. So now that they have this privileged lifestyle, they're afraid of losing it all and think they will lose it all if they walk away from this industry. So I feel like I should dig deeper to, again, never to condemn a person, but just condemn the act, and then try to be compassionate enough of a human being to get to the root of those fears to help a person overcome those fears. So when we look at all this behavior that is sick in society, I don't really even condemn the people that exhibit sick behavior either, because the people in power have created a sick society for us, in which up is down, left is right, in which their schools condition obedience and compliance that literally makes us dumber people. They create anti-social media apps. I refuse to call them social media apps, because their apps make us less social, have less humanity, and make us dumber, but yet they continue to call them social media apps. So I believe there's a false labeling of anti-social media apps, because there's nothing social about them, as opposed to more nuanced, textured social interactions in real life that have proven to be the building blocks of deep and emotional bonds that we form with our friends and people of importance in our lives. Anti-social media apps force us into virtual spaces that provide none of these deeply emotional experiences with our friends, and instead they slowly chip away and erode our humanity. The type of social currency people seek through anti-social media apps is detrimental to our happiness in the real world, but yet the usage of anti-social media focuses us to waste time and energy in trying to collect as much social currency as possible. For example, a 4-year-old Kleiner-Perkins study about the relationships we hold with our smartphones, and I do call it a relationship, because sometimes people interact with their phones more than they do with their wives, their husbands, their girlfriends, their boyfriends. This study concluded that the average person interacted with their smartphone 150 times a day, and this study is still quoted today, 4 years later, because it was conducted in 2013, but it's way off base because it preceded the explosion of anti-social media apps as far as the usage rate is concerned. So I actually prefer to quote a different study, not that study, but a study performed by another research company, D-Scout, that was just conducted, I believe it was this year, 2017, or perhaps 2016, but much more recently. And they actually invented their own app to track smartphone interactions amongst a group of 94 people they studied for 5 straight days. And this is what they discovered, which I believe is going to shock most people. Their app tracked every single time a person touched their phone. So this included all swipes, taps, touches, and clicks. And what they discovered over this period of 5 days is that the average amount of times that these 94 people touched their smartphone every day was not 150, not 500 times, not even a ridiculous 1,000 times a day, but, wait for it, 2,617 times a day. Yes, you heard that right, 2,670 times a day. And those 2,617 interactions per day were conducted with the average user in 76 separate sessions a day, with the top 10% of these 94 people categorized as the heaviest users interacting with their smartphones on 132 separate sessions a day. And of these 94 people, 87% of their participants checked their phones at least once between midnight and 5 a.m. So that means a very large percentage of people. I imagine like maybe you had a small fraction of people that go to bed after midnight, but most probably go to bed before midnight. So they're actually waking up in the middle of the night just to check their phones again, which is just, it's cray-cray behavior to me. I guess what this concludes about human behavior is that we're much more addicted to technology, like anti-social media apps, that distracts us from truly finding happiness, and we need to stop this behavior. And I will provide many concrete ways to achieve this when I launch my online SK Wealth Academy website coming up in 2018. So, you know, I have once joked with friends that if I were put into a deep sleep before mobile phones were invented, and then I woke up 10 years later in 2017 to observe people staring at a small mobile device everywhere I went. So I'm saying, like, you know, I was put into sleep before mobile phones were even invented. So not only did I not know what a smartphone was, I didn't even know what a mobile phone was. And then I woke up and observed human behavior, and I observed people staring at a small mobile device everywhere I went. From just walking down city streets, to on the subway, to walking around inside malls while shopping, to eating dinner with friends, to watching movies in a movie theater, and observed people using the same small mobile device everywhere. And I was forced to guess what this device was. This would really be my honest answer. Because I would look and say, oh, this is some device that people are addicted to because they can't stop using it everywhere in life. Even when talking with friends, they can't stop looking at it and can't stop holding it. So I would guess that it was some type of mobile unit that delivered a steady dosage of a drug that was more addictive than crack and heroin. And I would conclude then that I had woken up to this tragic society in which my entire city was full of drug addicts. That's literally what I would guess that it was. But even worse than these addictive apps, half of the most used, which have been invented and are owned by Facebook, Alphabet, and Google, according to some studies I've read, even worse than this is the coming invention of these billionaire and multimillionaire narcissists, in which they want to replace God, and which is And this is the reason they've been so persistent in trying to tell people there is no God, so that they can be our God. Well, that was actually their first step, because we have direct, historically documented evidence that they wanted to be our God, because they so much as directly told us this. For example, Henry Kissinger called U.S. soldiers dumb, savage beasts to be used as he wants to use them for his purposes and then thrown away in the garbage. David Rockefeller, the billionaire industrialist, stated that we are too dumb to govern ourselves and that people like him must tell us how to live, and he must be given power to lord and rule over us. And most recently, former UK Prime Minister David Cameron stated, quote, "For too long they have passively tolerated our attempts to live freely," end quote. And that they will no longer say to us, quote, "As long as you obey the law, we will leave you alone," end quote. So in that statement, he is implying that we must obey their every desire and their attempts to crush our souls and to restrict and confine us from living the way that we want to be, as long as we're not harming other people and minding our own business. He said that's no longer acceptable to them. If we don't obey their every desire, that we should be rounded up and put in jail. So when we look at the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world and their creation, not our creation, it's their creation of a society that is the dominant society in every nation on planet Earth, that is sick in every way imaginable, because it is sick educationally, with very little real education being delivered in academic classrooms, while they deliver tons of stress with dumbing down rote memorization, exam, and grade systems that are the leading source of rampant suicide in countries like South Korea. It is sick spiritually, with 99% of society members focused on soul-crushing goals in life, like material wealth and fame accumulation, and the accumulation of social currency with their peers and celebrity worship. They've created a society that is sick in mental health, with off-the-charts incidences of anxiety and depression, with the #1 diagnosis of psychological afflictions among people aged 15 to 35 is loneliness, anxiety, and depression in many nations. Our societies are sick in regards to physical health, with an emphasis on immediate gratification and taste over nutrition. When we look at this, in my opinion, there should be almost no obesity in every single nation. And obesity, unless it is a result of some gland malfunction, then I understand that, right? If you have, like, I don't know, a hyperactive thyroid gland, I think that can lead to weight fluctuation problems and obesity. But other than that, obesity is almost always a result of poor nutritional education, lack of discipline, and low income, a combination of that. And I know with low income it's really hard to solve, but obesity is a problem among the poor, often choose higher calorie, low nutrition foods because they are cheap and are filling in regard to appetite. But there are also solutions to these problems where there's workarounds around these low incomes, like communal farming on a communal plot of land purchased and cultivated with pooled money and resources. And I know that answer is not a convenient one, but I just want to say there are answers to problems that individuals have because of a lack of resources. When we observe the prevalence in society of celebrity worship, brand label obsession, equating of extreme, almost obscene wealth with success, equating of brand name schooling like Harvard, Yale, University of Pennsylvania, Oxford, Stanford with education, and the systemic societal acceptance of fame and fortune as more important than the achievement of humanity and compassion, we can clearly see the heavy sickness that has spread into every corner and crevice of mainstream society like a suffocating mold. Because every single person, that views these abnormal constructs that have been forced, because it's not a natural process, it's been forced to the top of society by those people that have the most wealth and resources in society in every single nation. When these abnormal constructs rise to the top of society and are viewed as normal and are perceived as normal, but really they should be perceived as mentally sick, then we can see that a very sick society has been deliberately engineered for us to live in. But we must escape from these constructs, and we can escape from these constructs before it's too late. All we need to do is seek education outside of academic classrooms that are designed to produce millions of young adults all over the world that think exactly alike, and that would be blindly compliant to the power structure of the governing body in every nation in the world. Why would we want to send children into these academic classrooms that are more focused on behavioral engineering and conditioning than education? We have to return to living in the real world and turn off our smartphones and live outside our phones and start living inside the real world by having conversations face to face with our friends again and actually meeting with them instead of texting with them incessantly. We must push our extreme greed that is blinding millions of us to chase the very paradigms meant to enslave us, that are ushering in the very paradigms that are meant to enslave us, like 100% digital currencies. And I believe, this is my sincere belief, I do sincerely believe Bitcoin is part of that paradigm. And we must push our compassion for each other to the top and our greed, our selfish, narcissistic greed to the bottom. And we must stop deceiving our fellow men and women by pushing our own selfish, greedy, narcissistic agendas to the top just because they benefit us, without any concern for our greedy goals and the impact of these goals upon our communities and upon those with whom we cohabitate. And I also want to encourage everyone to stop using social media as much as possible because of its dehumanizing effects on people. And this is the thing about the AI god that Silicon Valley multimillionaires and billionaires want to create. I believe because they understand everything I laid out in this podcast, that they wouldn't even actually try to seek to build a cryptocurrency. They would try to make us, because they understand the current state of society and the current addiction of people to social currency. I believe that an AI would build as the currency we use to actually buy goods and services, buy our food, buy our homes. They would form a social currency because they already realize we're far more addicted to that than any fiat currency or cryptocurrency, and that would be the thing they would invent to enslave us and to control us, which is a very, very scary thought. So even if the intentions of the people that want to build and create an AI godhead are good, because they say they believe it can actually make people more human and compassionate towards one another, I still believe this is a terrible, terrible idea, besides the fact that it will philosophically be rejected by a lot of people because they're not going to worship anything that's man-made, as a godhead. But that's not the primary point. The primary point is that this AI godhead this person wants to create will learn by observing human behavior, because what else is there to learn but by observing behavior on this planet? And they're going to observe that the people that have risen to the most powerful positions in society exhibit the most narcissistic behavior, the most self-absorbed, greed-driven behavior. And that's what they're going to mimic to try to get to, because they want to be all powerful, right? Because if you're creating a godhead, it wants to be all powerful. So they're going to mimic the worst behavior of the worst human beings in order to achieve what, once it becomes self-aware, to achieve the most powerful entity, being the most powerful entity on earth. I'm not even saying I believe in a totally perfectly egalitarian society, because that's just nearly impossible to create, even if you try to enforce it, which I don't believe. and trying to enforce it, because there are always going to be free riders, like people that try to basically receive benefits for just being lazy and doing nothing and riding on the coattails of the success of others. And then, I do believe in a capitalistic structure where those who put in more effort reap more reward. That's the way, life should be. So the fact of the matter is we don't really have any capitalism in effect in any nation, although people falsely believe there is, because capitalism, in order to have capitalism, you have to have free markets. In order to have free markets, you have to have market setting interest rates, and markets determining prices by setting interest rates through supply and demand determinants. But you don't have any of that if you have a central bank in effect. And basically, as we know now, nearly all 194 nations in this world on planet Earth have the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Warburg, Morgan family central banks in effect, which is god-awful, because this very concept of a central bank is one of the most important central tenets of communism, which a lot of people don't know, again, because, as I said, schools don't really educate. And that's why a lot of non-critical thinkers out there also always promote this idea of democracy and say, I live in a democratic country. But if you think about it, a democratic country means a majority rules, right? And how many times does the majority not rule? You see it in politics all the time. You see what's going on with Brexit right now. The UK want to leave the EU, and those that rule the EU, they don't want the UK to exit, so they're preventing them from exiting. In Catalan, in Spain, they wanted independence because it's a complete, like, people don't even understand. It's just not a part of Spain breaking off from Spain, but it's a region that's rich with a totally different culture, even a different iteration of the Spanish language. So they definitely have very regional, distinct differences that sets them apart from the rest of Spain. And yet, what happened? The Spanish Prime Minister sent in thug cops to beat up people that wanted independence, and they also imprisoned the leaders of the independent movement. So we don't have democracies because, in these instances you basically have, a lot of times well over 90% of the population that wants something, and they don't get their way when you have the tiny oligarchy of just a few thousand people that rule an entire nation and force their ideas and force their narratives and force their will upon an entire nation. And that is also why people believe, like I said, we have democracies when we truly don't. We don't have any democracies in this world. And what we have are oligarchies, where very few amount of people in every nation decide the entire course of the politics, of the foreign policies, of the financial policies in that nation. So we don't have any type of, even from putting us on an even playing field, because people make that comment all the time. The wealthy always say, oh, the poor need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps because we all have equal opportunities. That is entire garbage and propaganda, because if you truly understand how the fiat currency system works today, it gives massive advantages to those that are the wealthiest in society and puts them 1,000 steps forward beyond any starting line that the middle class, even the upper class have, and definitely like 1,000,000 steps ahead of the poor. So no one is on an equal playing field, because the type of currency system they've employed, it does not give everyone an equal opportunity. So I think the AI will learn from this and want to, they will learn and see, oh, this is what I need to be the most powerful person in this society. So they're going to mimic the worst behaviors of the worst human beings on this planet. Okay, we're getting close to the end of this podcast, and I want to discuss again, take it back to transhumanist Mark Pesce. I don't know, it's spelled the same as Joe Pesci, so I'm assuming his last name's pronounced the same way. And in any event, this is what he said. He said, quote, because this goes hand in hand with their desire to create an AI god. He said, quote, "We seek therefore to bless ourselves with perfect knowledge and perfect will, to become as gods, take the universe in hand, and transform it in our image for our own delight, as it is on earth, so it shall be in the heavens. The inevitable result of incredible improbability, the arrow of evolution, is lipping us into the transhuman and apotheosis to reason, salvation attained by good works. So it literally sounds like he watched one too many Marvel superhero comic movies and he believes that they can create their own gods. It's crazy. When I go to the Way of the Future, which is www.wayofthefuture.church, here's more crazy talk for you. This guy said, let's stop pretending we can hold back the development of intelligence when there are clear, massive short-term economic benefits to those who develop it, and instead understand the future and have it treat us like a beloved elder who created it. So this is his God complex and the hubris and arrogance of wanting to be worshipped like a god for creating an AI god. He further goes on to say, quote, and that was a quote from his website, what I just read. Another quote, we believe in science. The universe came into existence 13.7 billion years ago, and if you can't recreate / test something, it doesn't exist. End quote. That is crazy talk too, because he's saying it like that's a fact. The universe came into existence 13.7 billion years ago. No, it's a theory, and as much as that theory is supported by a lot of science, it is not a fact. And no one knows if the universe came into existence 13.7 billion years ago or 10 billion years ago, because guess what? There's no human being that's 14 billion years old today that can say, or 13.7 billion years and 1 day old today, that could say he was there when the universe was created to confirm that fact. So he's saying we believe in science, and if you can't recreate, test something, it doesn't exist, which is idiocy at the highest level. Because I would tell him, okay, recreate the earth. Recreate the earth. You want to become a god to other people? You want to create an AI god and really discount everyone else's religious beliefs on this world that there already is a God that exists? Then create the earth. Because you said if you can't recreate it, it doesn't exist. So if you can't create a parallel universe and a parallel second earth, then this earth shouldn't exist. Because you can't prove it by science by creating it. So this is an insanity of where the richest people on this planet are taking us. So that's why I call this podcast Billionaire Artificial Intelligence Hell, or Commoner, which most likely is you and me listening to it, because I doubt any billionaire is going to listen to this, or Commoner Red Pill Bliss. The choice is ours, and I choose to be a commoner, and I choose to ingest the red pill. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that comes from the movie The Matrix, meaning you're rooted in reality of what's really going on and not in the deceptive perceptions that have been artificially engineered by the upper echelon of those in power in society today. So that wraps up my podcast today. If you found this podcast at all, just even a tiny little bit interesting, then please do sign up for my podcast. Sign up to my RSS feed, which you can find in the show notes, because this podcast will be released on iTunes in the future, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and you'll be able to find out all the different ways you can subscribe to my podcast and be informed of when I upload new content just by subscribing to my podcast RSS feed, which you can find in the show notes of this podcast. And as a little bonus, because I want to encourage everyone to stop using social media as much as possible, because again, I really believe it has a lot of antisocial effects on people. I'm going to end this podcast. I'm not sure if I'm going to make this a regular occurrence with every podcast, but I'm going to end this podcast with a series of shout outs to my peeps and friends that I think, my hermanos y hermanas all around the world that I think will listen to the podcast. So you don't have to go to social media to receive your dopamine dosages. Okay, so here's a shout out to Aurelia in Lithuania, Elaine in France, Alex and Mike in Thailand, Ala and Jesse in Australia, Chris in the United States, Brock in the Netherlands, Elizabeth in Germany, Nam in Korea, and Lisa in, I have no clue in what country you are now because I cannot keep up with your nomadic, vibrant lifestyle. Okay, so that concludes my podcast for today. Again, I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please pass it on to your friends and family, because I am going to depend upon you for the organic growth of my podcast audience. So I'm 100% relying on you to pass it on to anyone in your family, your colleagues, your friends that you think might find this podcast interesting. Please, please do pass them on the link. I'll be forever grateful to you. And thank you so much for listening. If you made it to the end, I appreciate it so much. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. And always remember to give thanks for all your blessings every day. Always remember to remain intensely curious. And until next time, I hope I see you back on the Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast. So long.